Today we are going to be taking a look at 5 underused anti-meta Pokemon, whatever you want to call them, but 5 Pokemon that definitely deserve a little bit more usage in the Regulation F metagame, and we're going to jump straight into things with Baxcalibur. Now, of course, Baxcalibur did indeed get second place at, I believe it was Liverpool. However, that's really all it's done. And one of the biggest problems I find with Baxcalibur is you absolutely want 5 moves. You love having access to Glaive Rush. You love having access to Big Ice Stab with the Icicle Crash in this case. You absolutely love Swords Dance, and you absolutely, in my opinion, need Protect. However, this becomes a lot more of a problem when if you have Swords Dance versus Dragon Dance is one debate that's up in the air. We'll get into that in a bit, but to start things off, you really also just want Ice Shard. Right? You desperately want Ice Shard on this Pokemon. Being able to be Clear Amulet 90% of the time, right? So you're not getting intimidated. Ice Shard just being able to pick off Landorus is incredibly strong. Just put on big pressure priority-wise anyways, regardless of if you're going to one-shot or not, is still really strong. You're doing about 30-ish to a Flutter Mane, which is still really good. But the problem is, you're doing 30 to a Flutter Mane, doesn't sound that great. And this is where I say you want that 5th move. You'd love to be able to set up, whether in this case it's a Swords Dance, right? All of a sudden you're at +2. Now to a non-bulky Flutter Mane, you're probably doing like 70, maybe 80%, right? So any chip on that Flutter Mane, it's no longer a threat to you, right? You also have +2 Glaive Rush, right? Which is absolutely incredible if you set up with a Swords Dance, right? You're one-shotting so many things it's unheard of. Right? So the question is, which move am I supposed to drop here? And that's really why, in my opinion, we're not seeing a ton of Baxcalibur, because Thermal Exchange is a fantastic ability. Getting that attack boost if you do get hit by a fire-type move can't be burned right now. And as a physical attacker, not being able to get burned, and with a Clear Meal and not being able to get intimidated, not being able to get burned, the concept right there is really strong. And I think, in theory, this Pokemon needs to be explored a lot more. Right? You want to be able to boost up, but you also want to be able to have that priority. And I believe Pato had this as the moveset with Glaive Rush, Protect, Ice Shard, and Swords Dance. This felt a little sketchy to me, right? Not having the big ice move and being solely reliant on Ice Shard as my damage dealer into any sort of fairy type felt a little shaky, right? Obviously something like this does get walled out by Terra Fairy Furrygraph. You actually cannot touch that piece. However, I don't think it's the end of the world, because you can get around that. So is this an option for you to go? Absolutely, right? But I think what the better option here, and my way to get around this, is probably to have that big ice move and just run Protect and find a different way to boost your attack stat, right? Because getting to +1 on Baxcalibur is amazing, and there's ways you can do this, and I think the best way to do this is actually going to be that Gouging Fire core. And I'm going to say Gouging Fire beside a few of these Pokemon today, just because I think Gouging Fire is a very strong enabler. Not only are you keeping Baxcalibur alive by going for something like a Breaking Swipe, you are also potentially boosting it with a Howl. Now, I know in the Global Challenge, and I did a video on this as well, there was a Lava Plume Gouging Fire. I think this is a little bit more of a best of one thing, not really open team sheet based, but it's an option. It's kind of cool. It was kind of fun. But I do think Howl is probably a little bit better to boost this Baxcalibur up. And then it allows you to free up that slot that you would normally have to dedicate to a setup piece in order to just be able to do some damage. You probably want to go Terra Poison or Terra Water. I like Poison. Poison just makes so much sense. You resist a fighting, you resist a fairy, right? Poison just makes so much sense on Baxcalibur. I see no real reason to not Terra Poison here. And then you don't need that much attack. You probably want to go around to jump around 116, right? I'm not going to build like a full-on spread for you guys, but you can do a lot, right? You can sit around to 114, 115 mark. Pick something where you think you're going to probably outpace some Rillabooms, which is probably a good way to look at Baxcalibur here, because you have the ability. If you're just faster than it, okay, +1 bye, right? Like, Baxcalibur just feels so strong in that regard. I think it definitely deserves a little bit more usage. Like I said, it got that second place in what I believe was Liverpool, but it's just seen nothing since. I think it deserves a little bit of a better spot in the metagame and definitely deserves to be explored a little more. Pokemon number 2 is going to be Galarian Zapdos. Now, Galarian Zapdos has seen its fair share of usage, but I think it deserves a little bit more. Obviously, it is a fairly frail piece, and you are kind of limited to needing to go Choice Scarf for the most part. You can get away without it, but I think Choice Scarf just enables this piece to fight a little bit better into the current metagame. You also run something along the lines of probably Terra Steel or Terra Poison. I think Steel has been the common of what we've seen so far, right? But overall, guys, and this is another common theme of the day, flying coverage is incredible right now. A lot of teams are actually going with double grass. We've seen a lot of Ogerpon Rillaboom, Ogerpon Amoonguss, Rillaboom Amoonguss, right? We see that kind of stuff. We see Urshifu as well. It is a fighting type. It gets hit by this. Not a lot is really resisting offensive flying either. And one of the things that does resist offensive flying right now is a big ol' steel type. And you are hard fighting. So you have options to just click close combat. You have options to just drop Brave Birds. You also get cool Thunderous Kick if you wanted to try and pair this user with another fast offensive piece where you could lower a defense into a hit to follow suit and actually take things down a little bit quicker, right? Just get free double ups into things, take some knockouts. I like knockoff. I want to talk about knockoff. I also want to talk about U-turn really quick. This Pokemon has all the tools to be a strong choice scarf option for pretty much any team, and I really like it. And we've started to see it on Trick Room teams where you lead the Trick Room setter plus Zapdos, and Zapdos can threaten a piece that's probably going to stop your Trick Room setter from going up. You're going to kill that, or if you don't need to worry about your Trick Room setter dying, you can always U-turn into your Trick Room piece, set up Trick Room, and then you can proceed to sweep, right? There's a lot of options with Zapdos. You put on big pressure. You probably want to go pretty close to max. There's probably a little bulk you want to put in, especially if you're Choice Scarf. As long as you're outpacing Scarf, Adamant, Urshifu, which would be 149, you can hit 150. Maybe you want to go a little bit higher. I feel like maybe speed tying Scarf to you at the end of the day doesn't feel too bad. Scarf to you isn't too relevant, but it's definitely something I wouldn't want to be necessarily slower than by accident. You know, just one of those ones, if I can have the ability to potentially speed tie modest Scarf to you, I might as well take the chances, you know. But regardless, my point being is that close combat Brave Bird right now is incredible coverage. Brave Bird alone is hitting the metagame for incredible offense. You cannot get intimidated. In fact, if they try to intimidate, they are going to boost you. This Pokemon needs more usage. We saw this a lot with Teal Mask Ogerpon, right? Where, you know, they want to intimidate you, but intimidating you doesn't realistically work all that well, right? And especially on a slower, like on a Trick Room team, right? A lot of the times the games start to be cycle in, cycle out. You can get a lot of positions where Zapdos cycles in as they're trying to cycle and intimidate onto something else. You can get that intimidate drop, which ends up being a boost for you, and you can definitely take full advantage of that. I think this mod is being slept on. Obviously, it's seen a little bit of usage. I think it deserves to see a little bit more. Pokemon number 3 is going to be Suicune. Now, I'm a little biased towards Suicune. I've always loved Suicune. It is exactly right up my style of play. Inner Focus is a really strong ability. Not being able to get faked out is really strong, especially on a support piece like Suicune, because you get access to, you get Tailwind. You could go Icy Wind if you want. You can go Ice Beam if you want. You can go Snarl, which I think you definitely are going to want to have, and then you just go Scald. So not only does Scald still have that nice little 30% chance to burn, which is very good and can get you out of a lot of bad situations, you also have access to just matching Tailwinds at a more passive rate on a really bulky Pokemon, right? Like, you are not dying to a lot, right? And just being able to be on the field, being alive is incredibly strong because you get these crazy support moves. You pair this with maybe something like either a Leftovers or a Citrus Berry, and your longevity on the field is just that much more because, like, oh, you take 40%. Okay, now I snarled you. Now I'm going to take less than 40%, and I'm still getting lefties back, a recovery back every single time. I can match Tailwind just to maybe help out because there's a lot of teams right now that really appreciate Tailwind. Now, is Torn maybe just a little bit better? Perhaps. But Suicune gives you that bulky option, gives you something to do after you set Tailwind. Now, granted, clicking Bleakwind also is something to do after you set Tailwind, but not being able to miss a Scald, right? Just potentially getting a burn off into something feels incredibly strong, right? The problem I find with Suicune right now is you're going up against the likes of like a Water Ogerpon, right? You can't really touch Water Ogerpon. It is probably winning this matchup 90% of the time versus you, and that just feels bad, especially when Water Ogerpon is at 66% usage. So you do have to be careful, and you do have to build this thing with ways to actually capitalize on Suicune's strength, which is to be slow, is to neutralize things, is to hinder them down, get Tailwind up, support your team a little bit better, right? Maybe burn the odd Pokemon, and you're going to need to find a way to put pressure on, and that is why Suicune, in my opinion, hasn't really been seeing a lot. Because Ogerpon just does it all, right? Ogerpon is the support water type, and it can also go on the offense. Suicune can't do that. Suicune, yes, it does get Tailwind, which gives it an advantage over Ogerpon. However, you really have to make sure you are playing offensive beside it. Now, whether or not this is big damage dealers like Fluttermane, right, or maybe even like a Landorus, right, like there's a lot of options for big damage dealers. The problem is making sure you are actually capable of doing damage besides Suicune, or while you have the Tailwind on the field, is probably one of Suicune's biggest downfalls, because Suicune itself does not exert any sort of realistically offensive pressure. It does a lot at slowing things down. Snarl, Scald Burns, Icy Wind, right? It does a very good job at slowing things down, but it's missing that punch, right? So being able to pair this thing with things that can actually pack a punch feels like it could be an incredible option. Like, I feel like Suicune Amoonguss on its own is just an incredibly defensive core, and then you pair this with just offensive powerhouses. Suicune and Amoonguss are going to be what you do. If you go up against Trickroom, you have an Amoonguss. If you go up against Tailwind, you can match that, right? These feel like your support pieces, and then you're going to want to go powerhouse in these last 4 slots, right? You are looking to do some damage, right? Whatever that ends up being, I do think Suicune definitely needs to see a little bit more play. It's a cool little passive way to match opponents' Tailwinds, hinder off some of that like side spam stuff as well. Snarl is just a really good move. Scald potentially burning. It's a strong option. I definitely wouldn't sleep on this pick. I'd be curious to see if someone can actually break this team and make Suicune like to top 8 or even win a regional. I think this Pokemon could still win a regional. It used to be, historically, it's a good Pokemon. It's a little power creep right now because everything is going so fast, but like I said, if you compare it with something super, super strong, you've got an option here. Pokemon number 4 is going to be to like and subscribe to the channel if you guys are enjoying the content so far. Pokemon number 4, the real Pokemon number 4 though, is going to be Corviknight. And once again, guys, like I said before, that passive Tailwind, that speed control, that offensive flying type coverage is what I'm looking to showcase a lot in this video, right? And one thing I like about Corviknight is Mirror Armor is a really cool ability because you are a physical attacker. And once again, another physical attacker that cannot get intimidated. In fact, you bounce that Intimidate back. So if an Incineroar comes onto the field, tries to intimidate you, they themselves are getting intimidated, not your Corviknight, which feels really, really strong, allowing you potentially options to set up with Bulk Up if you so choose. You also, like I said, similar to that Suicune, you get the Tailwind, right? And you also get access to a lot of other things. You can heal yourself up with a Roost if you wanted to. You also get access to Body Press if you wanted to go with an Iron Defense Body Press set instead. But I think you really want to take advantage, if you're going to utilize Corviknight, on this Brave Bird, right? And I talk a lot about offensive flying type coverage. It seems to be like the theme of the week every other week, right? But people just forget how good offensively flying coverage is, especially in the meta right now, right? We've talked about it already when we were talking about the Zapdos, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. But one of Corviknight's big things is, once again, that passive Tailwind, the ability to set up, the ability to self-heal with a Roost, right? And just get those Brave Bird damages off, get some big damage out, not being able to get intimidated. And I think one of the important things here is you resist Fluttermane's Moonblast. That is not easy to do in this meta, believe it or not. I really do like the Steel Flying typing. It is actually a very strong typing in the metagame right now. You completely wall out the Landorus Eyes, or the Landorus Incarnates, that are clicking Earth Power and Sludge Bomb. They cannot touch this Pokemon. You win that matchup in a 1v1 if you can play to that, right? You wall out Fluttermanes if they decide to lock into a Moonblast. Obviously, they're still doing a little bit of damage, but if it's a 1v1, you'd have more than enough time to Roost back up and to slowly chip away with Brave Bird. They can't kill you before you kill them, basically, unless you're already chipped, or if they lock into like a Shadow Ball or something like that. But you can play to that, right? You can play to forcing them to lock into a Fairy move and then get Corviknight in. But more importantly, guys, this is just one Pokemon, right? You serve so many purposes here with Brave Bird, and then you have Tailwind support, right? This is very similar to a more slowed down passive version of a Tornadus, but this one's actually going to be a little bit bulkier and probably sit on the field a little longer. You can go with something like a Rocky Helmet, if I could type. You could go with something like a Safety Goggles. You can go Terra Dragon here as well. I think this Pokemon is incredibly, incredibly strong, incredibly versatile, and I don't think it's seeing enough play. The problem, once again, with Corviknight is it just doesn't do enough that fast. You're going to see a lot of players talk about it. I believe it was Neil's video recently, earlier in the week, where he said, you know, pair this thing with Gouging Fire. And I know I said this with Baxcalibur as well, but what if you just paired Corviknight with Gouging Fire, right? You have Tailwind, and Gouging Fire teams historically do not have a lot of speed control. They struggle with speed control. So now all of a sudden you pair this with a Corviknight, You have that speed control. You can't get intimidated. If they try to intimidate you, you're at least intimidating them back, because that's one way to cycle down gouging fire teams, right? You cycle those intimidates, cycle those around, but then Corviknight all of a sudden kind of helps prevent that. The synergy here feels really, really nice. You know, you're weak to ground. You have the ground type switch and immunity right now. Feels really, really good. I think it's a cool concept. Definitely something that needs to be explored a little bit more. Whether or not it's paired beside gouging fire, I think that's up to you, but I do believe Corviknight needs to be seen a little bit more in the format right now. And Pokemon number 5, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this one, I'm sure. Ryan, Comfey is just not good anymore. Okay, I hear that. I really do. But Triage is a busted ability. Okay, Triage has giving healing moves +3 priority is absolutely wild. So you compare this thing now, you get something like Draining Kiss, you get Giga Drain. All these moves are being launched off at +3 priority. You also get You also get Floral Healing, which is basically Pollen Puff, but now it's +3 priority. That feels pretty good to me, if you ask me. I don't know why, but that feels pretty good. You also can self-heal if you wanted to heal yourself, which I feel like is a little less optimal. But you have options is what I'm saying on Comfey. And I think one of the bigger things that isn't talked about enough, despite all the healing moves and all that, you get access to stuff like Trick Room. But also, apparently this thing has wings somewhere. It is going to set Tailwind. Why you get access to Tailwind, I don't know. So now you have 2 different forms of speed control. If you so choose, you can pick whichever one you feel fits your team the best. And then you also just have priority damage. And I get it, Draining Kiss is not the strongest move, right? Giga Drain is not the strongest move. However, when you're launching these things at +3 priority, you have a lot of options to where they can whittle you down and chip you down, and then all of a sudden you just heal that health back up and you get going, right? Or you can EV this thing, despite what it looks like, you can EV this thing to survive Urshifu hits, right? And then all of a sudden you go Draining Kiss. That is a +3 priority into the Rise and Dark type Urshifu right now. Any chip damage on that Urshifu, and it's probably just going to die to Draining Kiss. Obviously, you'd have to double check my attack stat, your attack stat for that one, because I feel like you're probably going to need a little bit of investment, because 82 is unfortunately not that great, right? However, once again, guys, this is my wild card. I think Triage is too good not to mention. I think it's a fun option. I don't think it's going to be making any strides in the metagame like any of the other 4 that I've already suggested, but I really did want to throw in like a wild card, something a little bit underrated, you know, just because I do think there's a niche here. And if somebody can find it, there's definitely an opportunity. Now, back in the day, Comfey also, by the way, hold up a second. Comfey also gets Helping Hand. So there's a lot of options with Comfey is what I am trying to say here. Right now, back in the day, with the Dynamax era format, Pokemon would be incredible, because you would go Dynamax your Pokemon beside it. You would go side Draining Kiss or side Giga Drain for a weakness policy. Now, I don't think that's too viable anymore. However, I don't hate it. I really like the concept of Comfey Archaludon right now. I really genuinely think a concept like this could be incredibly, incredibly strong. Do you actually get Rain Dance? You do not. That would have been heat. But unfortunately, I had to check, okay? That would have been absolutely heat. But I do like the concept of Comfey Archaludon because it gives you options into things. Now, generally speaking, Archaludon is a Pokemon that really appreciates having stamina, having the body press, and being able to be healed back up. Now, recently you've been seeing this with Amoonguss. Is Amoonguss just a better partner? Perhaps. However, Comfey is able to set up Tailwind. Amoonguss can't do that. Comfey could set Trick Room for Archaludon. Amoonguss cannot do that, right? You have options with the Comfey. And then worst case scenario, you have priority Draining Kiss or a Giga Drain. So they lead Urshifu. They're like, oh, I'm just going to click Close Combat and kill your Archaludon. But, oh, I don't have Terra available. Well, I'm just going to Giga Drain myself. Get the +1 boost because of stamina. And then the Urshifu's Close Combat is no longer going to kill my Archaludon. And I'm going to kill the Urshifu back with my Archaludon. Right? So there's cool concepts like that. I think this core could be really, really fun to be explored. Archaludon is one of those Pokemon that wants to be so good, always seems to fall short, but then you go against it and you're like, wow, this Archaludon guy is kind of good. So I'm curious to see if Comfey Archaludon can become anything, even if it's nothing more than a niche off-meta sort of fun team. But Comfey alone is the concept of pick number 5 here. Just wanted to have that wild card in there. I think it's cool. I had to bring it up. It was a little bit fun. And come on, who doesn't love this thing? Like, look at this. How do you look at Comfey and go, Come on, I don't want to use that thing. I want to use this thing. It's kind of cool. It looks fun, right? But that's going to do it for the list, guys. You see it here on the screen. Nothing too wild. Once again, a lot of priority on that offensive flying stab, those passive tailwinds. But once again, you also have that damage dealer that I have here in Baxcalibur. I think all 5 of these could make strides. Comfy's probably, once again, it is that wild card option. But I really do think it may see something, especially if it's on like a really niche team. I could see it being used, but the other 4 absolutely deserve a ton more usage than what they are seeing right now. But with that, guys, I am going to stop rambling. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you do enjoy the video. It really does help out the channel, and of course I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in a future video.